This is From the Wheelhouse with Annapolis School of Seamanship. Welcome to Annapolis School of Seamanship. As you can see, we're up here in the pilot house, right, Matt? Isn't that what we call this room?
That's right.
I'm Captain John Martino. This is Captain Matt Benhoff from Annapolis School of Seamanship. Todd Lochner, Lochner Law Firm.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. This is exciting. We've been talking about doing this for a while.
We have, and we are ready to jump right in. We have so many topics that we could cover.
Yeah. And so for this inaugural conversation, if you will, we will discuss making money with your boat.
Everybody wants to make money with their boat.
It's better than losing money with your boat.
Todd, today is what, April 7th or so?
7th or 8th, something like that.
Yeah, so who knows when this will come out, in a week or so. But do you think that if somebody's watching this a week from now, can they be making money with their boat this summer?
It is theoretically possible, but they really need to put their ducks in the proverbial row sooner rather than later.
Okay, so we better talk fast then.
Yeah, well, let's roll it out.
All right, well, so we got a lot of things to talk about. I got a list here. We're going to talk about some charters first. Obviously, the first thing you got to talk about is if people are thinking about making money with their boat, they're probably thinking about, well, I could be the captain of my own boat. I want to take it out and take people out either fishing or sightseeing or whatever. Or the other alternative is they could be just chartering the boat out by itself. And so we're dealing with a couple of different topics there. Todd, when we talk about charters, there's basically two types, right? I mean, there's the time charter and the bareboat charter.
In the recreational context, that's correct. There's also a voyage charter, which is more in the shipping world that you're not really dealing with very much in a recreational context. But the time charter is when you are, as owner, maintaining the operational command and control by specifically employing the crew yourself, or in fact, what is more frequent in the recreational context is that the owner of the boat wants to be aboard as captain aboard or operating. And that's clearly a time charter. Conversely, you have what is colloquially known as a bareboat charter, which is giving the entire of the vessel, 100% of the vessel, to the charterer and all the operational command and control.
Right. So, and there's some nuance to that, and we'll get to that in a second. But Matt, of all the people we see coming here who, for whether they're coming for recreational classes or for captain's license, what do you think most of the students are saying they want to do? Not the ones who are going to work for like a dinner cruise boat or something like that.
I would say it's about 50% of the class, in most classes, where the students are trying to figure out a way to make money with their boat. Whether, like I said, they want to go and take people out for the day, sailing around, or they're taking people fishing for, fishing trips and things like that.
Right, and that brings into question you might need a fishing guide license in some states. That's state to state thing.
Yeah, and it's really surprising. In Maryland, you can, before you even take anyone out fishing, you could have your captain's license, you could have your boat fully ready to charter, but if you don't have those actual fishing licenses, it can be pretty expensive and difficult to get.
Yeah, so there's some nuance to that too. But jumping back to the charters, Todd, if what I'm hearing you say, and I know enough from things we've done in the past, work together, classifying something as a bareboat charter has some specific things that have to happen with it, in order for it to be a bareboat charter and not reclassified as a time charter.
Correct. And with respect to that, the most important thing is the entirety of the vessel and 100% command and control. And that's really where everyone who wants to go and take their boat out falls down, because they want to be the one aboard and they are thinking that what they're doing is a bareboat charter, when in reality they are still aboard as the owner, still in command and control, and that is a time charter. 7 ways to Sunday, the Coast Guard's going to say that's a time charter, nice try.
Okay, so what you're saying is that a bareboat charter means somebody comes along and wants to charter my boat, or lack of a better term, rent my boat. I can't tell them, they're basically stepping into my shoes as the owner and I can't tell them where to go. I can't control the boat. I can't be on the boat.
Typically, you're not, and there's Latin for that. And when you see Latin and a lawyer,
You mean the Latin language? Are we talking
yeah,
about
we're talking
Latin words?
No, we're talking Latin words.
What are the Latin words?
The Latin words are owner pro hoc vice.
Okay.
And so any bareboat charterer is an owner pro hoc vice.
Mm-hmm.
But be frightened anytime you see a lawyer in Latin, right? It's usually BS to follow, but there's an actual term for that.
Okay.
And they do step into the shoes in their entirety. And one of the things that you can do if you're attempting to charter your boat in the bareboat context is you can either work with one of these charter management companies, you can do a peer-to-peer platform to charter your vessel.
What's that?
A peer-to-peer platform, for example.
As opposed to, in Matt and I, when you say peer-to-peer, that usually means we've traveled from one pier to the next.
Yeah, this is P-E-E-R.
Oh, a different spelling.
Yeah, so the peer-to-peer as far as person-to-person.
Okay.
And there are online platforms. There's been some consolidation over the last couple of years. One of them I happen to represent, so in full disclosure. And what it does, it's a charter broker so that people can actually charter vessels bareboat typically, although time is also possible in these platforms, just through online forums.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you put your boat in there, and I want to rent a boat for, put it in the vernacular, and I could just rent your boat.
Essentially, to put it in the vernacular. There's a lot more to it, and,
yes.
and each one of these topics that we're talking about could be its own hour-long discussion as we sit around this table. So I'm just hitting the 30,000 foot level here.
And for the bareboat charter, it doesn't require that the operator then be a captain or have a merchant mariner credential versus a time charter.
Typically not in a smaller recreational scenario. You don't have to have that. When you get into the larger vessels, of course, you're in a situation where that's not necessarily so. But in the context of what we're typically dealing with in the 40, 50, less than 60-foot range, yes, that is often the scenario.
Got it.
So this is what you do. I mean, this is what people do when they go with one of the big charter companies. If I charter for moorings, and it's a bareboat charter. Moorings isn't telling me where to go. And I, as a charterer, am kind of stepping into the owner's shoes, and I'm in command of that boat.
Correct.
But if I don't know what I'm doing, the charter company can require that I have a captain.
They can require, and then the charterer hires the captain directly and has the ability to bring anyone as a captain, provided that they are going to comply with the insurance requirements, etc. And that's the part that really gets you to being a bareboat. Because if you have the charter company say, sure, you have a choice of one captain, well, that's not really a choice.
Right.
And therefore that then converts back into a time charter. But by all means, it's a great idea because, credit card captains are a dime a dozen and create all kinds of damage in that context. So it's sometimes much better for everyone involved. The charterer as well as the owner as well as the company doing the charter management to have a mechanism to bring a captain aboard. And frankly, even very good sailors sometimes, just for the sake of not being the one always in charge,
right,
will bring along a captain. A friend of mine is in the BVI this week doing the exact same thing. Incredible sailor. You know what? I don't want to be the guy making all the decisions.
Hire the local captain. Mm-hmm. So if you're chartering, so in the context of this conversation, we're talking to boat owners who want to make money with their boat this summer. And if they want to charter their boat out, they don't want to be the captain. They're going to bareboat charter their boat. They can provide the charterers with a list of acceptable captains, or that charterer could bring his or her own captain.
Charterer always has the option of bringing his or her own captain. However, the owner can be helpful to the charterer by supplying some captains who happen to already be pre-vetted by the insurance plan that's in effect for the vessel.
Okay.
But you always have to have the right to bring your own captain and crew, even though the chances are that right will ever be exercised are between null and zero.
Okay. So, and we'll get to the time charter, which is more what I think folks who come to our captain's license courses are wanting to want to be captain of their own boat. But before we get to that, let's talk about the boat for a second, because there's some things with the boat that have to be in place. It's not just any boat that you can charter. Is that right?
Absolutely. We'll start with a distinction for something called coastwise. So you guys have all heard of Jones Act, no doubt. And Jones Act is two things. A 1924 law that has protections for a seaman, but also have protections for building vessels in the United States called the cabotage laws. And Jones Act, cabotage side of it, requires that any vessel that's going to be used for passengers, U.S. port to U.S. port, have a coastwise endorsement. And in order to get a coastwise endorsement, you have to have a U.S. built boat. So I have had people sitting on the couch crying because they just invested X number of hundreds of thousands of dollars into a vessel that they cannot use for time chartering.
You have a couch in your office?
Yeah, I do.
And tissues?
Tissues. The conference room is for depositions. Therapy is part of what we do sometimes.
Like every boat
and so,
company.
Yeah, exactly. So I've had people crying on the couch because they've just blown all this money.
So it's got to be U.S. built if you're going to get documented for coastwise trade. But some boats, are too small to document, right? If you're under 26 feet, you can't document the boat. It has to be state registered. But that rule still applies?
Let me back up. There is a caveat called a MARAD waiver we can deal with later. But back to your question, yes, you could have a under 26-foot boat, which would not be subject more than likely to documentation because it would be under 5 net tons. But it also still has to be, quote, otherwise suitable for coastwise, which means you still have to have it be U.S. built, even if it's state, to technically not run afoul of the law. Now, whether that actually happens or not,
most
malleable.
I would say most. It's probably over 90% of the boats under 26 feet in the United States are built in the United States.
Probably.
The vast majority.
Is there any way to have a non-U.S. built boat?
There is, which is perfect segue.
He's a good straight man.
Perfect segue into the MARAD waiver.
Okay.
So it used to be you literally had to have an act of Congress in order to have your foreign-built boat get a coastwise endorsement to operate in the United States. And there are some that have that. I recently ran across one. So it still has one. But what ended up happening several years ago is MARAD, the Maritime Administration of the United States, put together a program. And the program was, hey, instead of bugging your local congressman or senator to get one of these things and whining and dining to accomplish the goal, you can ask us. We're not going to produce any forms. We're not going to tell you how to do it. But there is a program. Now, eventually, I think it was about 5-6 years into the program, they actually produced forms, and now they have a system. And you don't have to have a lawyer who knows how to do it and write the letter and know what's in the letter. Now they actually have a system. So you can do it. It is I think it's $600 fee to them, and then they have to publish your application in the Federal Register. The Federal Register, for those of you who do not know, is a wonderful, wonderful way to go to sleep. I mean, it'll give Ambien a run for the money.
Yeah. No, we've had to deal with that on rulemaking stuff.
Well, that's precisely where all the proposed rules are put out by the government. So you go there, it sits for a while, and the point is to allow people to complain. Allow people with U.S.-built boats in the same geographic region that you're attempting to get your MARAD waiver for your foreign-built boat to work, to say, no, wait, this is going to take work away from me. I am complaining. And when that happens, that's when your MARAD waiver can be at risk.
So I think you said something there that's kind of important. That MARAD waiver is for a specific geographic region.
Correct.
I can't just get one blanket MARAD waiver that I can use my foreign-built boat for charter work in the whole country.
The way you often can get it is the entire East Coast, for example, all ports except for New York Harbor.
Okay, so you're going to have to unpack that one. Why not New York Harbor?
Well, a couple of years ago, there was a gentleman in New York Harbor who had a U.S.-built boat running charter ops for tourists, and it was a small boat, and someone applied for a MARAD waiver, and he objected. He ultimately ended up having an administrative process with MARAD, and MARAD unfortunately lost. MARAD wanted to give the waiver, and he said, no, it's going to affect my business. So MARAD was not permitted to give the waiver for that small piece of New York Harbor. So as a practical matter, this gentleman now has a veto over any request. And I have spoken to him, and we have had MARAD waivers given in his little vicinity if he approves them.
Right.
Wow, he's just self-appointed
Well,
appointed himself there to that whole area.
Well, and the administrative process appointed him as veto power for that little area now.
All right, so I could get the whole East Coast with my foreign built hull. I don't really have a foreign built hull, but I mean, if I did, I could get the whole East Coast theoretically, except for one little section of New York Harbor, so long as no one objects.
Correct. So where the real problem arises is one, you go into your local pub and you say, I'm the new guy on the block. I've got this foreign built boat and I'm going to take all the business away, thereby irritating all of your competitors who then, well, the hell you are.
Yeah.
And then they start.
So they wait for it to come up in the Federal Register. Okay,
Right,
so
exactly.
when you apply, you keep your head down until it goes through and you have your MARAD waiver. Okay, so that I need that even for bareboat charter. Because I need a coastwise trade endorsement on my document.
You need coastwise trade endorsement on your document for a time charter, not necessarily for the bareboat.
Okay.
But this is a 90-day minimum process for the MARAD waiver. So you ask at the top of this discussion, if somebody wants to work it now, can they get themselves together to work it in the summer and make some money? Mm-hmm. And I have the typical lawyer qualified answer, probably, but they need to get started now because the MARAD process, if that is required, is a 90-day minimum process.
Okay. So let's shift over to the time charter. I mean, we're kind of there, but Matt, most of the folks that we're training for, well, not most, because a lot of them are in the industry, but getting their licenses, working their way up from a deckhand to a captain. But we have a lot of people that want to, run their own boat. What are the turnaround times? I mean, they have to come to the class.
Sure, they've got to come to the class and complete it. And so, depending on which class they pick, if the timing lines up, they can get to most classes any month. So it's going to take at least 2 weeks to get a master's license.
Well, they get through the class.
To get through the class, excuse me, to pass the course and get their certificate. But then
they could home study. There is another route besides going to an approved school.
Right, we can discuss that. But let's say they finish the course, they still have to put together an application to the Coast Guard and submit it to them. So depending on, again, their timeliness and putting together that application, some folks can get together in a week or two. Some, they draw it out a little bit longer, but they're going to submit that application to the Coast Guard. And from the time the Coast Guard receives it, and this varies, I've seen it turn around as fast as 3 weeks. I've seen it turn around and take over 6 months. And I'd say right now, currently, we're somewhere in between that, sitting around 3 months turnaround time.
That varies.
It constantly varies month to month. They put out reports on how fast they're processing applications. But like I said, right now, and I'd say for the past 6 months, it's been about 3 months total time turnaround.
There is a little trick to the trade there, is that you don't want to be applying to National Maritime Center for your license when all the maritime colleges graduate and all of the students all of the graduates of those maritime colleges, their licenses are going through, tends to cause a traffic jam.
Yeah.
So that is one time of year to avoid.
Yeah.
Now this presumes sea time, correct?
Correct. So before you can qualify for the license, you have to have or be able to document 360 days on the water. And you can go back as far as 16 years old, but of that 360, you need at least 90 in the past 3 years to qualify for the license.
So if you want, I mean, so you'd want to get started now for the summer. Alternatively, if I want to do time charters on my boat and I don't have a captain's license, I could hire a captain.
You could do that, and if you were coastwise, you could hire a captain. You could also then go the bareboat route and stick it in a peer-to-peer as well.
Right.
And there are plenty of things. I mean, each one of these topics could be their own roundtable discussion, but
Sure.
Yeah.
those are the two basic elements in if you were not in a position to have your ticket and do it yourself.
Right. So that's probably by far the simplest. The simplest thing is to put your boat into a charter program and let the charter company deal with it.
Well, yes and no. I have my own beefs with many of the charter companies because I have at least 5 pieces of litigation against one of them right now. But
Well, we won't mention any names.
so I'm not going to mention any names. So
Yeah.
you'll find me hesitant to say the easiest thing you can do is stick it with a charter company because
You have to be
have
careful.
that may have its own set of nightmares that leave you hanging for the next year or
But
two.
there's some really good ones.
There are some good ones, mind you.
Yeah, and I know, for example, when a charter company we've been working with lately is excellent. It's an excellent company. They take pretty good care of their owners, and they take good care of their charter guests. So
There are some excellent ones. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we represent 2 that are excellent, but there are some that you want to be careful with. Evidence the 5 we're litigating against now for the owners, on the owner's behalf. So that's one way to do it, but there's also the peer-to-peer side as well.
okay,
And that is newer. The big company right now is Boatsetter as far as market share. And the crux of peer-to-peer is it allows for the insurance problem to be solved, which we haven't gotten to
that was
yet.
the next thing. So let's just jump into it. A recreational boat policy is may or may not allow you to charter any type of charter. But if it does not, you're saying that this company has some sort of supplemental insurance that takes over.
Well, indeed, one of the things that happens is that most of the recreational policies are not going to permit time chartering. They may have the capability to do bareboat, most not. And you'll want to make sure you check with your individual carrier and see what if, 1, will they do it? 2, what will it cost you? Because those are barriers, the beauty of the peer-to-peer that has gotten going in the last decade here, full force, is that they have programs worked out where the boat's policy is going to be null and void during the period of the charter. But they have a fleet policy that will take over for any vessel which is chartered using that platform. Now, of course, that costs a little extra because they have to take their percentage to pay for that insurance on each charter. And so you can do, in the peer-to-peer contexts, you can typically do both a time charter or a bareboat charter. The difference being, if you're doing a time charter, chances are that you have your own insurance and you're getting more money for the charter, but you're also taking more risk, you're paying more for the insurance. If you do the bareboat in the peer-to-peer context, you're typically not paying for your own insurance for that period. And so they're going to take a little more money. But that's one way. And some people, I've been kind of surprised, but some people are buying 5 and 10 boats and placing them in various places and making money using the peer-to-peer process.
So one of the things I think distinction-wise that we deal with is the definition of the vessel. When it's in bareboat charter, it's one thing. But when it's in a time charter and there's a captain on board, it's in our world it's called an uninspected passenger vessel, a UPV. And so the license that you would have to have is either an operator of an uninspected passenger vessel, OUPV,
Correct.
commonly called the 6-pack, or a master mariner license, which covers 6-pack as well. It's a higher level license, but it's inclusive of doing six-pack operations.
Right.
So Matt, does that mean that equipment-wise and everything else, I'm fine with how I have my recreational boat set up with my Mae West life jackets and
Probably not. That is something you'd want to actually go and look through the regulations and make sure you qualify through the inspection process to have all the right equipment.
right. Even though it's an uninspected passenger vessel, there's still
Certain levels of equipment you have to have.
yeah. So that it's important, and I think a lot of people don't realize, Todd, like, okay, that Coast Guard safety package that the dealer provides to the boat owner when they sell them that boat, those life jackets are not going to rise to the level of what's needed on board. You need a Type 1 life jacket versus a Type 2 life jacket. And then you and I were just discussing the other day what you said about the plastic bags.
Oh yes, they have to all be readily available for use at that time. And one of the things that can make it non-existent as a life jacket for the purposes of the regulations is if you keep it in the original plastic from the store. If you do not
readily accessible.
If you do not break apart that plastic, it's not readily accessible anymore. And so one of the things that shocks people when there's been a big casualty, a death or something on a boat, all the lawyers show up. The first thing we do is we go looking for life jackets and flares, even if the casualty had nothing to do with any of that. Why? Because if you're on for the defense, or the insurance company side rather, you want to see if you have to pay the claim. The vessel with expired flares or life jackets still in the plastic, you have an out if you're the insurance company and not pay the claim if you don't want to. Furthermore,
Wow.
from the other side of the perspective, if you're a claimant, you're coming on and you're saying, okay, did we have flares? Did we have life jackets? Maybe the vessel was not seaworthy. It was not reasonably fit for its intended purpose, which is another way the insurance company cannot pay a claim if they choose not to. If you're a Jones Act seaman, anything that makes the vessel unseaworthy gets you recovery.
Okay, Jones Act seaman. Now there's a lot to that, and especially if you're planning to take your own boat out. If I decide I want to take my boat out, I'm going to take 6 people. Okay, I know that I'm limited to 6. It's an uninspected passenger vessel, under 100 gross tons. I need to be limited to 6 passengers. But maybe I want some help. Maybe I want somebody to pass around hors d'oeuvres or whatever, or help with the dock lines. And I take on a crew member for the trip. Is that what happens if that crew member gets hurt?
If the crew member's hurt and they're on board contributing to the mission and the function of the vessel, and a vessel that actually leaves the dock as opposed to a casino boat that is permanently moored, for example. And that's a whole nother topic. We could spend a whole hour on that.
Yeah.
But the point is that they're going to be a Jones Act seaman. That gives any Jones Act seaman has the right to sue their employer, and also brings an unseaworthiness claim, and also brings a maintenance and cure claim. Now the next question, right?
That's the rub there.
Yeah.
Maintenance and cure. That means pay for their place to live while they're recuperating and pay for their medical. That's the cure. Now, maintenance. If there is no agreement in place in writing, then you're probably going to be in the $40 to $60 per day to pay for them at a place to live. But if you have a collective bargaining agreement, like some of the commercials, that's as low as $8 a day. It's amazing to me. They sold them down the river on that particular.
$8 a day?
Yeah.
With a collective bargaining agreement?
Correct. But with no contract, you can probably get between 40 and 60. But the point is that you do not want to be the Jones Act employer because you have all of those problems.
What if I'm not paying this crew member? What if it's just a buddy who's going to come and help me, maybe just participate in the tips?
Well,
is that going to...
Well, that reminds me of, you want to be careful. The reason that reminds me is there was a captain who decided to do a delivery from Florida, and he decided to bring a maid aboard. Okay. Well, the maid he brought aboard was a stripper he had met. And as you can imagine, going to sea for the first time and rough weather, things did not work out very well. And this is a longer voyage up the East Coast.
Yeah.
So be careful when you grab someone from whatever establishment you were at the night before or from your local marina. They are now a Jones Act seaman, and you are their employer. And, you know,
If they're injured, then they're entitled to aid and cure. I mean, maintenance and cure.
Essentially. So I wouldn't want to be in the position that you're trying to make this claim, oh, wait, this person wasn't getting anything special, therefore I'm not paying them, therefore they're not. No, there's case law on that. Papai versus Harbor Tug and Barge, like 98, I recall, if 1998, I think is the last time Supreme Court spoke on this particular topic. So if they're contributing to the mission, the function, going to sea, assume, without getting too legalistic about it, assume that they're going to be crew.
Well, the bottom line is, though, so there's a lot of pitfalls, but this isn't, if you know what to do and you check all the boxes, it's not terribly hard to check all the boxes. You just have to know what the boxes are to check.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly it. It's the people need to know.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is, every time I come on and give any talk, everybody goes, oh, you upped the pucker factor, and now I'm scared to death. My point is not to scare to death, but to say, here are the things you need to know. As long as you have the list of check the boxes, you can work through it. It's when you don't know that you wind up in trouble.
Yeah, I see this all the time, right? With delivery captains who want to be, not that this is the topic of what we're talking about today, but we see captains get into trouble all the time because they don't have a delivery contract. And so expectations aren't set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We see a lot of captains who've come through here who were unknowingly, and some knowingly, doing illegal charters in certain locations.
Yeah.
Had no idea about an ounce of this information. They were just taking people out, charging them for rides.
It's happening, well, it's probably not happening today because it's raining around here, but I would guarantee you on warm days, there are lots of these happening. And there's been a big clampdown on this. I think you told me that the Coast Guard has elevated their enforcement of
Indeed. They had
illegal charters.
There was a point at which the Coast Guard appropriations bill came out, and one of the top 3 things Coast Guard was supposed to do several years ago was to start enforcing against illegal charters. And that really got started in the Chicago area because there was a, no one will name names, but an association that was interested in protecting the charter market for their businesses and didn't like a lot of recreational boaters taking out people that would otherwise buy tickets for their charter businesses. And so they complained loudly enough, and in Chicago in particular is where the enforcement began. That enforcement has continued all over the United States in the various districts, but particularly you see a lot of it in Miami and Fort Lauderdale area. And when these enforcements happen, we might find one to pop on a screen, but when these enforcements happen, there's $76,000, $96,000 are the fine that you receive.
Sorry, say that again?
Yes. Again, I don't mean to be the guy who creates pucker factor.
Well, if you're trying to do the right thing, the chances, I mean, if you're doing the right thing, but I think what we're finding is that people were taken, or the people we've spoken to who've since come to get trained here, they didn't know. They just are taking people out on their boats.
Yeah.
Started big time during COVID.
Yeah. Some of them just thought all I need is a captain's license. Right. And then they built the website and they were taking people out. And then, like I said, there were some who were just doing it until they got caught.
Yes. And then when they do get caught,
it quickly becomes less lucrative.
Well, if you're looking at tens of thousands of dollars, just sub 100,000 most of the time, that's a big nut to try to have to handle. And it would be much easier to have, I'm a big fan of spend the $1,000 ounce of prevention as opposed to the 100,000 for the cure.
Right.
So just to kind of sum things up, I mean, so there's regs, and here's how I put it together in my mind. you guys check me on this, because I was trying to do this for an insurance company that we're talking to about trying to help define all this for them. There's rules and regs that apply to first the Mariner, and that's your licensing mandatory drug testing program that you have to be in. So the Mariner, the boat, to include the equipment on the boat.
Correct.
So, and that includes everything from documentation, has to be documented properly, or if it's state registered, if it's too small, you still have to be U.S. built or within the parameters of what would be required if you were documented, and all the equipment that you have to have on board. So there's the Mariner, the boat, and then there's some regs that deal with operations, watch standing rules and such that are in, and you learn about that in your captain's license course.
Correct.
Certain carriage of publications and charts and things that you have to have on board. So not hard to check the boxes. There's actually guidance out there, and we have a copy of it here. It's something that we use in class, and it's the requirements for uninspected passenger vessels. So the Coast Guard publishes that, and that helps you to know what you have to do. Probably a good idea to have some charter contracts.
Absolutely.
Having an admiralty attorney look over what you want to do, make sure you've checked all the boxes. Like any business.
Right. Insurance.
Insurance.
Insurance is increasingly the limiting factor across the board for everything, including just the ownership of vessels.
Right.
A little while ago, we even had a presentation about the consolidation, and it was a spoof on the Game of Thrones. It was called The Red Wedding for insurance companies, and only one walks out. And you guys will know some of the names. That's its own whole roundtable discussion.
Right, but we want to keep this.
This is the 30,000 foot, hitting the peaks.
Right.
Yeah.
Since I mentioned it, one thing that I think that we need to address is, and this has come up in class, people will ask about the drug test, because now in many states, in our state, marijuana is legal. Well, it's not legal if you want to be a licensed captain. You cannot. You have to be in a random drug testing program, and you have to have a drug test, a clean drug test, before you get your captain's license.
Right.
So, it doesn't matter that it's legal in Maryland, or maybe legal in whatever state the listener or viewers in. If you want to operate and you want to maintain a federal license, it is not legal federally.
Well, that could be another 90-day delay, depending upon when one last used, if you're going to go for your captain's license.
Right. Like you said, there's the initial, there's a random drug testing program, and then most operations require an alcohol and drug testing policy pending if there was an accident within so much time. I think it's...
Yeah, Todd, how quickly do you have to, if there's a collision, do you remember that? Ray?
You want to do it as quickly as possible, but certainly within 24 hours you should be going for your drug testing, because if you're in a commercial context, you have certain obligations of paperwork which needs to be filed with the Coast Guard.
But I'm pretty sure there's going to be somebody from a law enforcement agency who's helping you along with that.
They'll probably tie your boat up for you.
Well, in some instances, but there are some instances in which I have defended captains, and they fortunately have been in a program and been able to go and get their own drug testing done within X number of hours of the death of one of the passengers, so that we can comply, so that we can get the paperwork in to both the state. Sometimes.
That's kind of a downer. We don't really want to end the conversation on a downer like that.
Well, I need the Debbie Downer shot, right? Wah, wah. For the old SNL.
We want to end on a high note. So we're going to talk. It's bottom line where we started is, okay, you can definitely do it by the summer.
It can be done by the summer.
Early April right now.
Right.
You could get it done by the summer. You may not be able to be. You might have to hire another captain to drive your boat or put it into a program if you can't get licensed in time. But getting the boat squared away, that's pretty quick.
It can be done.
Yep.
It can be done.
And I don't want to say it's going to definitely take 3 months. You can put together your application before you even start the captain's license, and you can get that expedited a little bit faster. So
right.
I'd say if you're on it, you could get it done before summer.
Cool.
Yes, you could definitely get it done before summer. I mean, the vast majority of boats aren't going to go need a MARAD waiver. The vast majority of what we're discussing are going to be available and either are coastwise or could be coastwise.
Awesome. Well, guys, thanks. I thought it was a good chat. Hopefully, people enjoy watching, and you'll see us again.